Traffic Jam is on now.
Yo, what's going on? I'm Marvin Phipps. This is Traffic Jam, man, with your special guest, Maya DiGiorgio. How you doing, baby girl?
I'm trying to wake up. No coffee, no makeup. Just trying to wake up.
No makeup. Oh my God, your skin is fabulous.
Oh, thank you. Well, that's the beauty of Zoom. They got a filter now.
That's not a filter.
Got a little filter going. I don't want to over filter, but I got a little filter going. Little touch up.
So, man, this comedy thing. Do you know? I just want to know, did you know, or when did you decide that you wanted to be a comedian?
Oh, I never wanted to be a comedian. I have avoided it my entire life. I've tried to back out of it, disappear from it, and get dragged in kicking and screaming. I was trying to do like a Whoopi Goldberg type, John Leguizamo type thing. I like that, like characters and stuff. And then I went on stage and I tried, someone encouraged me because they were like, my brother writes for Letterman and they said, go to Stand Up New York. So I went to Stand Up New York with my little thing. I'm like, I'm not trying to do comedy. I'm just trying to do my monologue. And then it killed. And then I was like, oh, shoot. And then I was like, let me go back. And then it bombed. And then I was like, why? And then I went back and then it killed. Then it bombed. Then it killed. And then I was like, next thing you know, I was like, went down that rabbit hole.
Damn. Isn't that weird how sometimes the same set can do different things? Why is that?
At the time, I didn't know, but okay. You can't handle stand up like a monologue. It's too many live things that are happening. So it needs to kind of still be live, like a monologue. Like, you still have to acknowledge if someone drops a tray of cookies or drinks and someone shouts or a couple gets into an argument. You can't just leave it there on the table. It's like, then it becomes improv,
Right. I hate comics that don't mention things that's happening, that's going on around in the show. And
the only time you can do that though is like if you're taping.
Okay.
Like when I taped my special, I don't know what audience these people got, but they were like, I swear to God, they were like, it's New York. I'm like, this is not a New York crowd, but I didn't know and they usually let you do like 2 to 4 tapings. They let me do 1. It was 1 shot and it was post-pandemic. This was like right after they let people out in April. Like, so there was no stage time. And right. I did an hour. And these people were like from Wyoming or something. Like I did Utah with the Mormons that were more lively than this crowd.
Really?
And so, yeah. And I saw 2 things that changed my idea of 2 or 3 things that have changed my idea of how you tape. One of them was right before I taped, I watched Pryor in some of his early specials, and how the audience didn't seem to be going with him, but the camera, he was communicating exactly to the camera.
Okay.
So it didn't really matter what the audience was doing. 2, George Carlin. I went to go see him live one time and the audience was not going with him, and I went in the back and he was like, it doesn't matter, it's the MGM Grand. I did 20 minutes of what I wanted to do. But I still had to do my job. So I had to go back and do other material. But what was interesting, he said, but I had cards. I was doing a new bit. I held the cards up, not because I had to read them. I needed the audience to look at them. And that prop helps them understand it's a new joke. Mm-hmm. But I knew what I was saying. I taped my set, not to hear if the audience laughed, but to hear back if I said it the way the joke intended for it to sound when I wrote it.
Okay.
Then number 3 life lesson, Dave Chappelle, my Def Jam. Dave went on, the audience was pretty quiet, and then he did these little moments to the camera. He's like, if you're thinking, he's like, audience, if you think you're television audience, if you think you're clicking past a black C-SPAN, black caucus at C-SPAN, don't turn, because everyone was quiet.
Right.
But he just continued what he was doing. And then the audience caught up and rose up into this crazy applause when he finished. Wow. And then he put the mic back down because he wandered slowly to the mic, got the mic, put the stand down, looked at the camera as the audience went wild. And he goes, sometimes you got to let the joke just sit, just simmer a minute.
Wow.
And that's so for the camera, and then the guy who closed on my Def Jam crushed, the whole theater was rocking, but that crush didn't come across on camera.
Oh.
It looks like, because the audience was he was so intense with the audience, the camera likes something a little softer.
Mm.
You know, like I taped my Apollo, I was like, I crushed. I was screaming though into the mic. I didn't notice that was my first taping. So I did Def Jam. I was like, let me be cute and tone it down. And it made all the difference for camera. So you can kill in a room, doesn't mean it's going to kill on camera. So when I taped this last time, I was like, I'm just going to have to wing it in my head with the audience like stiff as can be. I'm like, just don't change the cadence for the camera. Don't worry about the audience.
So it's definitely a science to tape it, huh?
Yeah, but but if you're in a live show and the audience doesn't, if nobody acknowledges stuff that's going on, that drives me crazy. Yes.
You're watching the Traffic Jam.
So in when it comes to Netflix, why do you think, like with the Monique situation, why was someone like her is not getting what, let's say, what Amy Schumer was offered? Why you think stuff like that happens?
Why, like, do you mean like kind of like why some comedians tape like a Netflix and why some comics are on the road and not?
Yeah, don't get that opportunity. Yeah.
Oh, I think it's a tough question because there's a bunch of elements that go into things. I think sometimes it's having the numbers of who comes to see you, having the right agency,
Okay.
you know, agent relationship, having, I do know that the gentleman that makes the selections at Netflix, he was from Montreal and the Montreal Comedy Festival, which is there's a certain way, I think, what are you communicating, I think, is where people who are the bookers at Netflix that really came from like a very educated stance on what you're doing in your comedy. And sometimes it's not just about being funny. I do notice the comics that seem to be the most successful are the comics that really have something to say. Not just not being able to make you laugh, but being clear on what that is. And when they cut a deal, that they're kind of clear on what that is. You know, I know that, you know, Amy Schumer, there's a lot of questions around Amy Schumer. I'm not really that familiar with Amy Schumer's path and her journey. I know that she has a lot to do because of, you know, Judd Apatow and a lot of that relationship that she had and people that were building her and constructing her and fan bases that she had picked up from being on Comedy Central. So I think a lot of it has to do with that kind of visibility and also maybe the way they introduced the special and postured how they were giving her a special. And at the time, and also a lot of things have changed. I really feel a big shift since the George Floyd incident. I feel like there's a real push now in Hollywood, a real push for diverse voices, Black voices, and female voices. So the stance that was there, I think also to the change, if you think about when Amy Schumer had her specials before, you know, the big deals with Chappelle came through. So Netflix has evolved in a lot of ways. And I think a lot of that has to do with, you know, Dave now setting the curve and you know, in the tone of what's going on there. But why do some comics stay on the road? Sometimes it's just because they don't have someone representing them and no one's been made aware of who they are. Or that comic who's on the road, who was brilliant, has not developed a fan base. They just go for where the bookings are. And if you don't have a fan base and you don't have someone representing you saying that this is what he does, or someone like, let's say like Earthquake, someone like Chappelle going through and saying like, hey, he needs a special, guys, can we step it up? You know, then that shifts things.
Wow. Yeah. Because when you're a comic, you just think, oh, maybe they're just not funny, but it's a lot of stuff, like you said, that goes into that. Yeah, that's crazy. Wow. So you took a 15-year break. What made you come back?
I was trying to shoot and do film production stuff, and I was filming an event, and Robert Townsend was at the event.
Wow.
And I ran over and was like, oh, I'm such a fan of your work and blah, blah, blah. I don't really hold cameras. I'm, you know, I was a comedian and blah, blah. So he goes, send me your stuff. So I sent him my Def Jam, and about 2 days later, he called me up and cursed me out for like 20 minutes straight. And he's like, I don't even know you. I don't know why I'm cursing at you. And he just went off.
Wow.
how dare I quit comedy? I'm a comedian. I should never be holding a camera again. And then he made me write 3 hours of comedy specials, 3 different specials. And like, I mean, he was brutal. Like he would show up at my house and throw rocks at my window. What are you doing? And I'm like, I'm in here writing. And he'd be like, give me those specials. We'd go outside and he'd get in the car and he'd drive around and he'd pretend I was taping. He'd be like, all right, showtime in 10 minutes, 10 minutes. And he'd drive around for 10 more minutes. Come to the stage, you know, give it up for Maya. And then I'd have to go and he's like, I want to see you run it and I want to time it. And he's like, this is less than 45 minutes. This is an hour. You need room for laughs. You overwrote this one. And then actually the special I just did was something that he went through because I kept writing. I never wrote like that. I always got on a mic and did comedy. So I wrote all these hours. And then he was like, I think you wrote like 6 hours. You got to like, this is what your introductory special should be. So we went over for a hamburger. He sat there, he edited the special, I guess, handwriting all over the notes. And he goes, this is your first hour special. And then when I was like, I don't want to do that because I'm just impossible and a woman. So right. I didn't do that. I'm trying to keep up with my peers. Right. So I was working on something else. When the contract came through, I was like, you know what? I think he's right. I think that this other special is the introductory special because I don't want to not be able to repeat the new jokes. Okay. And so my manager was funny. He was like, what? I said, yeah, wait a minute. Robert edited me a special. I got it right here. It was like his handwriting was all over it. Like, cut to here. This joke. Bravo. Very funny. He is funny. So yeah, it was because, you know, he would lecture me like if you can be who you can be and you're not trying, then I can't be around someone like that because I don't want that uckiness to get on me when I'm around someone who could succeed and won't do it. I was like, ah.
Damn.
Yeah.
What should have come like me? I want to do. I never did a special. What should a comic's first special be about?
Well, he said to me, my first special should be proving to the audience that I'm funny.
Okay.
And I think that's interesting because I think a lot of comics try so hard to be deep. Okay. When they're young, and sometimes lots of times they forget that funny has to be first. Funny has to be first. And when you're funny, then, and it's also too, is instead of your first special, really, you know, you're going to do your, you know, like my Def Jam was like a 5 minutes, or my Apollo was like a 5 minutes. Your BET was like a 20 minutes at the time. So you're building, and then you have like then you have half-hour specials that used to be given out by Comedy Central, and sometimes they do that, sometimes they don't. But I got one for that was on Dry Bar, and then that ended up on Amazon. So then you're growing with it. So when you're doing your first hour, the key is, I mean, you want to introduce who you are. You want people to see who your life is. You know, like this is, you know, the reason why the Ray Romano show went off as a sitcom was because Raymond talked about his family in that 5 minutes and did a 5-minute taping for Letterman. Wow. So a lot of these comedy clubs that are the best comedy clubs in the country look to see, if you're a new comic, who are you? What makes you unique? What's your story? Could this be a sitcom? All in that 5 minutes. And then that's the people who usually play the main clubs in New York and play the main clubs in Los Angeles. And you'll notice if they may have a hard time if they go out to Jersey or, you know, St. Louis or Kansas or whatever, because people are like, you know, I just wanted to laugh. I didn't need this. But the comics that are gearing for television are usually the ones that get closer in position for the specials, and they have something unique. What's unique about me, and that it's funny. Not that I have to tell you my deepest, darkest secret the first time I meet you. I tell that to young comics all the time. They'll do like these dirty jokes. I'm like, no one needed to know that in the first 5 minutes of meeting you. Imagine you're shaking someone's hand, and the first time they meet you, and then you start, you know, telling some dirty, like horrible stuff that you wouldn't even tell your best friend. In that 5 minutes, it's an awkward 5 minutes.
Hey, what's up? It's your girl, Ida Rodriguez at Funny Ida, and you are watching Traffic Jam. Let's go.
You should really teach. Like, it's crazy. Like, it's so much stuff with comedy, like, to know, you know, it's a lot of stuff people just, especially comics, just don't Because when we were coming up, you're just told to rip. You know, you're not told to like have a set that can be for a TV show or do like, you know, and I think that's important. Like I learned that over years, but it took me a long time to learn that stuff. And I feel like if I would have knew that earlier on, I would have geared my writing towards that in the beginning versus now 15 years later. But
Well, the Brown brothers, when I first started Uptown Comedy Club, Andre Brown was teaching a workshop. And he's the one who taught me that he was like, I would be good in white clubs. I kill in white clubs, couldn't kill I was getting booed off in black clubs. But regardless, he said, you know, each joke is like an extension of your fingers and who you are is the palm of your hand. So everything should be an extension off of who you are. And he really made you start to discover who you are. Like, what is the essence of you? And once you found that pivot, you could just pick up jokes off of it. So, you know, it was the core of you. Like mine was, I'm confused. You know, like, just go on stage and say you're confused. He made you go on stage and start crying. Go on stage and cry and say, I'm so confused. And go on stage and cry, be like, I don't know if I'm half Italian, I'm half black, don't know whether I steal a car and get caught. I put collard greens on pizza. And that was hilarious, you know. Then I gave up to crying, but I still think sometimes I'm like, I should go back to that crying. It's really good.
When you started out, I'm sure it was a lot of comedians. Like, who started with you that are huge, and like who started with you that just don't do comedy no more?
Who started with me that's huge? I'd say it's weird because I came up behind, it's just weird because like ahead of me, but I used to hang out with every day, but he was severely ahead of me, was Chappelle, but I hung out with him all the time when I first started. He really looked out for me. But I can't even think of like, you know who also was ahead of me? Jameek, you know, Jameek, JP Justice, he tried everything to get me to quit. Jameek tried everything to get me to quit. I'm trying to think of who else I came up with. I mean, I remember like Bill Burr and Patrice, and I'd say Jim Norton. I'd say those guys were more like what I was starting. They were there. Norton was there every day. Jim Norton, I'd say Jim Norton. Rich Voss was already doing it and already super successful. Norton was kind of figuring it out as I started down to Boston. But when it comes to shows that the guys that were still ahead of me were still like Rob Stapleton was ahead of me. Drew Frazier was ahead of me. Gerald Kelly was ahead of me. I used to roll with, I said Pam Green, rated PG. She stopped doing comedy because she just had to take care of her daughter. It just got too crazy. The lifestyle was too crazy. But you know, a lot of guys came up with a lot of guys. Tracy Morgan, of course, was ahead of me. But he was Uptown Comedy Club, but he was already on TV when I first started.
Wow.
So I'm trying to gauge where my group was. Like everybody was killing, like Ian Edwards. Ian Edwards was killing. I was hoping to be like Ian Edwards. Patrice O'Neill had already been on Apollo Comedy Hour, but he had just come down from Boston with Bill Burr when I really had a strong time down there in comedy. And then the people who were still ahead of me were, you know, who was ahead of me but wasn't getting any love when I was getting a lot of love?
Ooh.
Wanda Sykes.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Wanda was, you know, Wanda's got more than a decade on me, but Wanda's like, she was like, nobody gave her respect, you know? And so I think also too, they do that with women where like, you know, they pitch women against each other. You know, I had like 7 minutes of hack jokes and she's doing a bunch of like weaved in and out stuff. And then it wasn't until Chris Rock picked her up as a writer. And then she got on, you know, through Chris and Louis C.K. is where that made all the difference. And I remember like back then, like, you know, the managers, nobody was touching Wanda. So that, yeah, so it's a lot of names.
Damn, you naming like legends, like that comedy scene had to be crazy back then.
Yeah, when I used to come down from Uptown, I first moved down from Uptown Comedy Club. I went to the Boston Comedy Club, and that was like, you know, Tony Woods, Greer Barnes, Dave Chappelle, Wanda Sykes, Dane Cook, Jay Moore every night. It was a madhouse down there. It was great.
Now, was these people
Neil
like
Brennan was the doorman.
really?
Yeah.
Was these people like, was they like big at that time, or they was just doing stand up?
Chappelle was rich.
Okay.
Everybody else was broke.
Yo, what up? It's your boy Ari Spears right now. Keep it locked. You watching Traffic Jam. It's gridlock. You ain't going nowhere. You got no choice. Tune in.
Chappelle was like rich at 17. Chappelle was always rich.
He always had money.
You know, he came into New York at like 17, went to the Montreal Comedy Festival, he took his 30-minute set that he came from DC with, broke it into 3 10-minute sets. So he was like 17, 18 years old doing 3 different 10-minute sets in Montreal. Then he got a deal from that. Disney was paying him like $1 million a year as a production deal, trying to build a sitcom around him, which they never could figure out how to do. And then he also got that Robin Hood Men in Tights. So he was like, when I first started, everyone was like, Chappelle. I was like, who? That guy from Men in Tights. Oh, yeah.
But see, that explains, that's why he's turning down money. It's like you always had it. Like,
yeah, that's what makes me laugh, because everyone's like, oh, the struggling artist that turned down the Comedy Central deals. Like, Rich, he was in millions at Comedy Central. That's hilarious.
That's crazy. See, I never knew that he was okay.
Okay, he was beyond okay.
Really?
Yeah, but at least he'd buy us all food and stuff. You know?
Okay.
He'd get me a cab ride home all the time. He's like, the JoJo, hang out. I'll give you the cab ride back to DC. And I could back to Brooklyn. I'll give you a cab back to Brooklyn.
Was you the only female in that group, or it was other females that was around?
That was on the mic and around, because there was always a bunch of
guys
around. Yeah, it was pretty much me. I mean, me and Wanda.
Okay.
You know.
Do you think that helped?
Wanda would punk him if they try to talk to me. Wanda would be fight like, she'd walk up and, oh, look at little Dave trying to get his Mac on. Or Keith would come by, oh, look at little Keith. It's like she would punk him. It was so funny. You know, sometimes you're like, thank Wanda. Thanks, Wanda, for getting me through that.
Do you think that helped develop your style, being around, or how did you develop your style? Did you get it from
It helped, you know, I could, in a way, I could think it helped me.
Okay.
Because I was like, I didn't get it. I was like a tomboy. I was like, I could be as good as these guys. But then I didn't realize that there's a lot of stuff that goes with women that are as good as the male comics. And there's a lot of guys who want to take you down a peg. And there's a bunch of guys it's a completely misogynistic male world that I refuse to believe was there. And, you know, not getting that is what really gave me the problems, I think, that forced me to kind of leave. It was it was like nonstop, pretty bad. And I didn't know how to handle it. So, and then they're just like, well, you know, like Tony was like, there's no crying in baseball, there's no crying in comedy. And I'm like, but that was sexual assault. There's no crying in comedy. It wasn't considered sexual assault back then. Then, you know.
Yeah,
did he rape you? Did he get you? No, I could fight my way out of it, but it doesn't mean it wasn't traumatizing. You know, they're like, all right, I'll take the police report anyway. We'll just call it harassment. It was like, but.
Yeah, I can imagine it was terrible. Yeah. Did you ever have any like because we hear all these stories back in the day, everybody was having like holding deals or sitcom. Did you ever have any situations for you?
Back in the day, when I first started, I was with ICM, and I was sitting in the office at ICM, and this guy calls up and he's like, I want to put her in a deal. And he's like, 30,000. I said, I'll do it for 150,000. And the guy goes, okay. But I said, but I want to be out in 6 months because I have the Aspen Comedy Festival. The guy goes, okay. And they're like, oh, he's serious. And so I go, don't worry, I'll let Barry Katz close the deal. And everyone's like, he doesn't like Barry Katz. And so Barry Katz stepped in. I'm going to ask for 200,000. I wanted to get myself. I'm going to be an executive producer. And he told ICM he went off on ICM. He said some very vile words. I won't necessarily swear, but he was like,
my
he said something.
God.
They said something. Like the guy who wanted to give us the deal was like, he hated Barry Katz. And then I ran into Dave at the club. He's like, oh yeah, Barry kind of screwed that guy over on a deal. So I was like, so I missed out on that deal.
Damn.
Yeah, that was, and then Barry acts like, you're so troubled. I think you should quit comedy. Like years later, maybe you should quit. He told me not to come back at the end of my 15 year, when Townsend was bringing me back. He's like, no one's going to hire you, Maya. Nobody.
Is he still around?
Yeah, he's still around. Nobody likes you. Nobody. No one's going to hire you. You just need to forget it.
This is Daryl Mooney of the Mooney Twins, sons of the legendary, now ancestor, Paul Mooney. Check us out on Traffic Jam.
That's crazy. Did you ever write for any sitcoms or?
No, nope.
Would you do that? Would you?
No, actually, I was going to try, people were like, you should write this, you should write that. And Townsend was very specific with me. He's like, you may be able to go in different places. He said, but he's like, you're like Lucy. You need to just be on a camera. He's like, you don't need to be writing anyone's stuff. You don't need to be holding a camera. Your face does not need to be hidden. You don't need to be just a voiceover. So I get yelled at. I still get checked on.
By Robert Townsend?
Yeah, like I'm a wandering little duckling that walks off the wrong way. He's like, I told you.
Wow. Did he come to your show?
No, he was filming something, but it was funny because he spoke to me all through the last 48 hours. So turn off your phone, don't talk to anyone but me. And stay away from everybody's energy. Don't turn on social media. He gave me the steps into it. And then he actually went through the edit when I got the rough cut. He went through it, did notes on my cuts on that. And he's funny though, because I had to do a taping for something else, and it was just for a play. And he was in New York and this was during a couple months ago. He was shooting something in New York, a Netflix series. But he'd come off set. He was on set since 6 o'clock in the morning. Come off set, get on Zoom with me in the theater, and give me notes as I'm at 1 o'clock in the morning. So I'm grateful. He's just an angel. So
I think that is so dope for him to do that and take out. Man, that's dope.
yeah, he's
and you didn't know him all those years, or you just met him when you met him?
yeah. And he's funny because like, how did I miss you? I don't know. I'm like, I'm from New York and I quit.
Oh my God.
Like a comedy mad scientist, that dude.
So speaking of, do you write your own jokes, or how do you come up with your material?
I come up with my material by being frustrated at things that people say or do. And I get so upset and offended. When I get to that point where I'm offended and appalled, I need to get a pen, because then I just start I try to make logical sense out of it naturally. And then that is actually the joke.
Okay. Wow. Well, we took up enough of your time. I want to thank you again for being with us today on Traffic Jam. Plug your stuff, plug your Instagram, your Facebook, and your show that you got. I can't wait to watch it.
Oh, thank you. It's Maya at $1 Million Maya. So if you can just find $1 Million Maya on social media, on all social media platforms, except for Twitter, which is just Maya DiGiorgio. And my special, Robert made me write 500 names. So it was easy when they're like, what's your name? I was like, Maya. And it's on Amazon, and it's on Amazon August 16th.
Man. Congratulations. We can't wait to see it. Man, it's been an honor talking to you. I've learned so much. You is a comedy gem for real. I think you should write a book or something, yo. Like for real. You got the stories, you got the game. Definitely. I wish you all the best. Can't wait to see the special. Thank you so much for hanging with us on Traffic Jam, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Traffic Jam is on now.